In this lecture, I'd like to introduce propositional logic, which is going to be our topic for the first half of the course. I'd like to begin by starting out by talking about the relationship between English sentences and the claims that they make, or the relationship between English sentences and what philosophers often refer to as propositions. So, as you well know, some English sentences express truth-evaluable claims about the world. That is, they say things about the world that are either true or false. And some English sentences do not. So take the sentence, Earth is the third planet from the Sun, for example, and the sentence, Earth is the fourth planet from the Sun. Both of these sentences express truth-evaluable claims about the world. The first sentence expresses a claim that happens to be true. The second expresses a claim that happens to be false. But they both say something about the world. They both say something about the world that we can judge to be true or false. The sentence, "Don't pollute the earth," on the other hand, does not express a truth-evaluable claim about the world. It's being used to issue a command. It's an imperative. It doesn't tell us something about the world. It instructs us to do something. Now, in some philosophical contexts, it's important to make a distinction between the sentences that we use to make various claims and those sentences themselves. Take the sentence, "I am hungry," for example. You and I might both use this sentence to express a claim, but the claims that we would be expressing by using these sentences would be different. It could be, for example, that I use the sentence, "I am hungry," and you use the sentence, "I am hungry," at the very same time, but that I'm lying when I say it, so that the claim that I make by using that sentence is false, whereas the claim that you make by using that sentence is true. So the fact that we can use the very same sentence at the same time, and one of us can say something true by using that sentence while the other says something false, shows us that we can use that very same sentence at the very same time to make different claims about the world. So we need to distinguish between the sentence and the claim that it makes. Now, the truth-evaluable claim that a sentence expresses, as opposed to the sentence itself, not the sentence itself, but the claim that it makes, is called the proposition expressed by that sentence. So take the English sentence, "Snow is white," for example, and the Spanish sentence, "La nieve es blanca." These are obviously different sentences. They're not even found in the same language, but plausibly they mean the same thing, or they make the same claim about the world. If one were going to translate one sentence into the other, these are the sentences that one would put together. Now, the same thing that these sentences both mean, or the same claim that they both express, is what philosophers call the proposition that's being expressed by those sentences. So in the previous example, when I talked about the sentence, "I am hungry," there we had an example where one sentence is used to make different claims. Here we see an example where two different sentences are used to make the same claim. So once again, we see that there's a distinction between sentences and the claims that they make, or between sentences and propositions. Now, it's not always that important to carefully distinguish between sentences and the propositions they express. And often in this class we won't bother to be so careful. Often we'll just kind of run together sentences with the claims that they make. But this distinction is philosophically important, and since this is a philosophy class, I thought that I should mention it. As you no doubt remember from elementary school, it's the business of declarative sentences to express claims about the world. Or as we're now putting it, it's the business of declarative sentences to express propositions. Now, maybe not all meaningful declarative sentences express propositions. So in ethics, for example, it's controversial whether sentences that seem to be used to make moral claims actually do express claims about the world. So some philosophers think when I say, for example, that killing people is wrong, I'm not actually making a claim about the world, but I'm expressing an attitude. I'm saying something that's equivalent to killing people, yuck, or don't kill people. Other philosophers believe that when I use the sentence killing is wrong, I am making a claim about the world. Now clearly that sentence is a declarative sentence, but it's controversial whether in fact it expresses a proposition. But for the most part, what a declarative sentence typically does is express a proposition. Now, English also has various devices for taking sentences that express propositions and joining them together so that they form sentences that express other propositions. These devices are called sentential connectives. So sentential connectives, or sentence-forming operators, as your book calls them, are devices for taking one sentence and joining it with another. For example, and, the word and, is often used as a sentential connective. So for instance, we might take the sentence, the sky is blue, and the sentence, the grass is green, and combine those sentences with the word and to get the sentence, the grass is green and the sky is blue. And all three of these sentences express different propositions. There might be possible worlds, for example, in which the sky isn't blue but the grass is green, or vice versa. And so it could turn out that the first of these sentences is true and the second is false, or vice versa. But in order for the third sentence to be true, the claim expressed by the first, each of the claims expressed by the first two sentences must also be true. So these three sentences all express distinct propositions. Another kind of sentential connective in English we find is the word or. So we might take the sentence, a Democrat will be the next president, and the sentence, a Republican will be the next president, and we might combine them using the word or into the sentence, a Democrat will be the next president, or a Republican will be the next president. Once again, we can see that all three of these claims express different propositions. I would not bet money on the claim that a Democrat will be the next president, nor would I bet money on the claim that a Republican will be the next president. Given the current state of things, I'm quite uncertain as to which party will be elected, will have a candidate elected as the next president. But I would bet money on the claim that a Democrat will be the next president or a Republican will be the next president. Given our two-party system, that would be a pretty sure bet. Yet another kind of sentential connective that we find in English is the phrase if then. For example, we might combine the sentence you study hard and the sentence you will get a good grade into the sentence if you study hard, then you will get a good grade. Now the kinds of sentential connectives we've been studying so far have another special feature. They are what are called truth-functional. That is, when these sentential connectives are used to join sentences together, we can figure out whether the proposition expressed by the resulting sentence is true or false just by examining whether the propositions expressed by the sentences that were joined together are true or false. For example, we can know that the proposition expressed by the grass is green and the sky is blue is true just by knowing that the proposition expressed by the sentence the grass is green is true, and also knowing that the proposition expressed by the sentence the sky is blue is true. Likewise, we can know that the proposition expressed by the sentence the moon is made of cheese or I'm the Queen of England, as uttered by me, expresses a false proposition just by knowing that the sentence the moon is made of cheese expresses a false proposition, and that the sentence I'm the Queen of England, as uttered by me, expresses a false proposition. Now, if Her Majesty herself were to utter this sentence, then what she said, the claim that she made by means of using this sentence, would be true. Alright, at this point you might be thinking, okay, so what? Who cares? This all seems pretty obvious and pedantic. Why bother making these distinctions? Why bother talking about this stuff? Well, we can do a lot of interesting things by thinking about the nature of sentential connectives. So it turns out that by studying how these sentential connectives work, we can discover various inference rules that tell us how to make valid arguments in English. So it's obvious, for example, that the following argument is valid. First premise, the grass is green. Second premise, the sky is blue. Conclusion, the grass is green and the sky is blue. It's obvious that this argument is valid. And not only is it obvious that it's valid, it's obvious that it's formally valid. That is, we can tell just by examining its logical structure alone that this argument is valid. So let's let P abbreviate the grass is green and Q abbreviate the sky is blue. When we do that, we see the argument that we just gave looks like this. First premise P, second premise Q, conclusion P and Q. We don't have to know what P and Q stand for in order to know that this argument is valid. We can tell that this argument is valid just by understanding how the sentential connective "and" works. Now for a slightly more interesting example, consider this argument. If it is raining, the streets are getting wet. It is raining, therefore the streets are getting wet. This argument has the following structure: if P then Q, P, therefore Q. And as we've already seen in previous lectures, this argument pattern is formally valid. It is the pattern modus ponens. And we can tell that any instance of this argument pattern is valid, and we can tell that just by understanding how the sentential connective if-then works. Just by being confident in our understanding of how that sentential connective works, we can tell that any argument that fits this pattern is valid. So one way to understand what propositional logic is that it's the study of how truth-functional sentential connectives work for the purposes of discovering valid argument patterns. That is, in propositional logic, we study how to tell that certain argument patterns are valid based on the logical structure we can glean from those arguments just by looking at the truth-functional sentential connectives that they contain. So that's what propositional logic is, and that is what we're going to be about in the next several weeks.